So I'm wondering, can you talk to us about the growth of sports that's occurring today and maybe some of the concerns that you have around that?
Yeah, sometimes I guess I'm not so concerned about the growth of youth sports as much as I am about the loss of the family and how much we're losing out on summers with kids and family and doing things that we used to do growing up because everything is geared towards an organizational, I got to go there, traveling a lot for sport as opposed to just families hanging out looking for something to do. So again, there's some tremendously healthy, encouraging, growing youth organizations and coaches and people that do it. I don't want to. I mean, there's been times I've sort of spoken out against all the summer sport because some of it can be destructive, I think, when we lose focus on what's the end game here. I think John mentioned the why. He made statement of, and you mentioned the why we're doing this. Of Simon Sinek, the book Start With Why. Why are we doing these things when as families we're doing them to get our kid a scholarship and they're 7 years old now and we're trying to, if we would save our money in youth sports from 7th grade till a freshman year in high school, we could fund any school. I don't want to take those sporting opportunities away. We have camps. I mean, I love to work with kids, but I just think the nonstop scheduling. I know I had a girl in camp. She was a 6th grade girl, and she told me on a Monday we had a little shooting camp half a day, and she looked a little tired. I said, hey, you look tired. What's going on? She said, well, this past weekend I played 4 basketball games and 6 soccer games. So from Friday to Sunday, and you just think about that, like to me, that's dangerous. And so some of it comes down to, as a parent, our kid can't direct everything. At the same time, we need to set boundaries for our kids of what's healthy for them. They have a gift, let's foster it, but at the same time, if the joy is gone, if there's not a joy in the game, we just have to step back and let a kid be a kid. I mean, I don't know how many kids climb trees or ride bikes in groups around neighborhoods anymore. I just don't see that much. The Sandlot type games. I'm sure he grew up playing, until you just going and playing. It wasn't always traveling with the team. So, you may be speaking to that too. I don't know if it was just playing. Right? I don't know if it was always organized or not. So, never against good organized youth sports, but just like you said, the proliferation of it, the overabundance. We need to make good decisions at times. So, again, as a college coach, I want kids to play all the sports they want, and if they don't want to play in the summer, don't play. We're not encouraging. I have a girl here that's going to be a tremendous player for us. And she loved to play. She's coaching in the summer now, but if she didn't want, she played football in high school. She was a field goal kicker for Munster. I mean, an incredible athlete. I'm not going to tell her don't play football because you might get hurt because, kids need to do what they want to do as they get older, but parents also need to help that.
Yeah, I think your emphasis on family is so important, and really emphasizing the need to, like, for kids to just have fun like they used to, right? And have those Sandlot games and those pickup games and just have fun and have it be more about just enjoying a sport for what it is, right? Which is great. Ashley, last question for you. What are some things that you've seen either with your own parents or maybe teammates' parents that you feel could create unhealthy spaces for their athletes? And what are some boundaries that you think are important between sports life and home life?
I would say that I think that I've seen a lot of parents literally push their children away from basketball or away from their sport. I see parents at games and the way they yell at their child, and like you can just hear, like, I'll be playing the game, but I can hear somebody else's parents getting on a child. Like it's really crazy, and I think that it's really important that as parents that, like, you guys understand that we want to make you guys happy. Like, we want you to be proud, and that's probably something I can say that happened with me is I chased my parents' pride. Like, I wanted to feel that, like, glow and that beam from them from doing something so well that they were so proud of it. They did whatever, post it, tell everybody, brag, whatever it may be. And I think it's important that you don't make your child fight for that. And I see that similar to what John was saying earlier is that there are too many coaches in their child's life. Like parents want to be coaches to their child, but they're on a different team and being coached by that person. They can't be surrounded by a bunch of different coaches. They have to have a coach, they have to have a mom, they have to have a dad. They can't have every single person in their life trying to be a coach to them. And I would say that's probably the biggest thing that I have seen and have felt growing up playing in sports.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I think that that's a really great answer, and really just understanding the importance of bringing your kid to a sport and showing them that sport because they love it, or you want them to love it and you want them to have fun with it rather than driving them away from it. Mikey, we've talked a lot about some of the negatives and some of the things that parents shouldn't do, and I'm sure that there's been times where you've seen parents' egos get in the way. But for you, I'm wondering, when have you seen a parent do the right thing? When have you seen a parent really support their kid the way that they should? And what kind of impact has that had on you when you've seen that?
Just from my experience of just coaching and watching parents interact with their kids, I mean, we always see the pros and cons of like how parents are, but I've seen a lot of great parenting within our basketball organization. Just being very supportive of their kids, whether they mess up, or whether they fail, they miss a basket. Because a lot of our kids, that's what we're teaching a lot of our kids now, is just give everything that you have. We may not have the best athletes, but that's not what we're trying to build. We're trying to build better people, and selfishly, that's what I want to do, because I've had a lot in my life that I wish was different. So just seeing a lot of our parents, just communicating I make it a point to communicate with some of our parents. Hey, I'm not trying to tell you how to parent, but I promise you, just speak from my own mistakes. If your kid messes up, just let them know, hey, hustle back on defense. Get it back on defense. Just be a little bit more encouraging. I've seen it and I've heard it, so, and just preaching to the parents hey, your kids trust you, but I need them to trust me, because there's levels to it. I have a lot of experience as far as the game of basketball, but I don't have the same experience that you do with your child. So it's a teamwork. It's definitely teamwork in this. So I've seen a lot of that, parents buying into kind of the philosophy that we have over at Rec Mu, and I'm learning from the parents as well. So, and even from the kids. So that's the biggest thing.
Yeah, I mean, that's really great. I love hearing you talk about just trying to remind parents, and this is how you can encourage them, right? Focus on what they can do rather than the mistake that they just made, right? Get back into the game and focus on what you can do, right? Move forward from the mistake. Learn from it, but move forward, right? And that's, I think, having those conversations with parents and trying to help the parents trust you, the kids trust you, and then it becomes a collaborative effort, right? So that's really great. Tarek, I want to move to you next. So I think it's really easy for an athlete to lose their identity as a human being and to really place their value and worth in their success or their failure in a sport. So for you, as you've reached a professional level, I think a lot of times fans focus too much on winning. And so that means that they can either love you and worship you when you're really helping their team to succeed, or once you make a mistake, they tear into you, right? So can you share a little bit with us about where you've seen that happen and what that's looked like for you?
Yeah, well, I can't really speak from the same experiences playing in front of 15,000 in the United Arena, but 4,000 at Lowry Field, not the same, but still. But luckily, I haven't been subject to it too much by, fans and people watching the game and stuff. But I've definitely seen it happen a lot, especially back home. When you go to professional soccer games, people are just torn down. Like the pro players, you got 60,000 people booing them, even though they're trying their best for their team. And it's horrible because it ruins players' career, their confidence goes down the drain. And, you know, if you have 60,000 people telling you you're rubbish, you're going to think that. And that's where I think them identities can start to mold into one, and really how you feel about yourself is based on how you perform and how other people tell you you've performed. And I think it's easy for an athlete to get caught up in basing their whole persona off of how they are performing on the field or on the court. For me, my junior year, I had a really bad year. I'm a striker, so I meant to score the goals, and I just couldn't score that year. And my coaches, he kept telling me, because I was one of the more experienced players on the team, and he was saying, hey, like, we need you to step up. We need you to lead these freshmen coming in and be a role model. And I said, well, how can I be a role model to them if I'm not even performing myself? And it took him saying to me, look, you are a lot more than just the goals you score. You do stuff off the field. People look up to you. You've been here for longer. There is more to you than just this one aspect. And I think we have to make sure that we remind kids of this and make sure that they really know that, you know, once again, their whole self-worth isn't based off their performance.
I love that, especially what your coach told you, that you're more than the goals that you score, right? And I think that there's so much truth to that, and that's a big reminder to any kid playing sport that you're so much more than the sport you play, right? But I imagine for you, as you've played soccer more and more, it has become part of your identity, and so having that reminder is really good. Coach Gomez, I'm wondering, okay, so a lot of athletes are focused on being the strongest, the fastest, the most skilled at their sport, right? And I think a lot of us, or a lot of athletes, want to be the star. And there's this culture of self-promotion. So ultimately, athletes and their parents are often setting themselves up for failure if that's their goal, is to be the star, right? So what do you think parents and coaches can be doing now to eliminate the focus on self? And how do you think that can create a healthier environment for athletes?
Yeah, sadly, I think I've said this at a group I talked to. I think we're living right now in the me-nited States of America instead of the United States of America, because everything's about me. I mean, everything. You know, kids they make a basket in a tournament. They're going to post it on social media. There's just too. Right now, our most important recruiting message that I give to players and parents if they want to come to LSU, honestly, you're not that important. I mean, I just think all of us need to, I need to tell myself that we are not that big a deal. And these days, everybody is trying to advance their own agenda, even at the cost of the team a lot of times. And in a team sport, you can't do that. So we have to have kids coming in realizing, listen, you're a really good player, but you're not that big a deal. At the same time, we need to be honest and truthful enough with our athletes. Now, I think sometimes these athletes end up, and the coaches aren't honest enough with them because they tell them they're so good, and then they get there, and then after a year, they're not playing, and so they're unhappy. Or we set up situations where 6 weeks later, they're like, this isn't what I thought it was going to be like. And so I think the coaches have a big responsibility in this as well, of being honest, as well as being truthful and loving. But now I just think letting people realize, if you're gifted, use your gift, but use your gift for the good of all, not for your own sake. And so the sacrificial love of a team, and it's a lot easier with female athletes than it is with guys. I mean, I think another probably a good topic would be the difference even in the genders of how we deal with these things. But a girl's more easy to convince to give herself up, but sometimes they give themselves up so much they don't do what they can. And so it's sort of an interesting balance. But I think every one of us needs to realize we're not that big a deal. I mean, God gave you a gift. He brought you from your parents to wherever you were born, and we have not created this majestic, wonderful person, career athlete, whatever. And so to me, I just think we have overemphasized individual at the sake of community. And we have to get back to the community is more important. And it speaks to what he was talking about. They're over in Great Britain, the team is more important than the individual. And so that may speak exactly to what he was talking about.
Yeah, it's really trying to emphasize the idea that you want to be great and use your gift, but how can we do that to help everyone, to serve the team, right? I mean, that's huge. And I think if more athletes had that mindset, I imagine sports culture would be a lot different in the United States. So one last question, and I think we have a little bit of time for each of you to just speak very briefly about this. But if each of you could give one piece of advice to this group, just one simple piece of advice, what would it be? And then we'll go down the line for each of you.
I would just say encourage your kids to have fun. Like, I don't even like how seriously I take it sometimes in terms of the sport. Like, it is so easy to get lost in the journey of reaching your goals that you forget why you started doing it in the first place. Like, first you have to fall in love, and then you fall in love, and then you have a goal to achieve, but you can't lose the love in your journey to achieve the goal. And I think that happens a lot, and it honestly, parents feed into it. So your child decides that they have a goal, or honestly, parents decide that their child should have a goal, and then they just put that much pressure into it, and then it just gets lost.
For me, it would just kind of be what I pointed on last time, just about the identity and just making sure that although no matter how successful we get in sports, that sports isn't our whole identity, and our children, just to remind them that that's not what they're judged on and not how much they're loved. It's more than that, and not just their sports.
Yeah, that's great. Live out of joy, compete out of joy, not out of anger or being tightly wound. And take what you do seriously, just don't take yourself too seriously.
If there was one deal, I would say, I got this from a video. It was pretty much having a baby. It was a young baby that kept falling on the floor, learning how to walk. But everybody celebrated. Oh, you can do this, you can do this. So I would say celebrate every single last success. Celebrate the success, but communicate through the failures. Positively communicate through failures. And I think you'll go a long way. You'll definitely be parents and not unnecessary coaches.
That's a really great piece.
How is everybody today? Great. Welcome to Redeemer Church and to our Huddle Up. We're so glad to have you. This kind of became a dream of mine. I work at Covenant and get to experience mental health through our patients. But I also am a mom of an athlete. I'm a coach, and sometimes I'm the mom that doesn't get it right every time, and have seen that impact in my child. And so this has been a passion of mine and something that I want to make a difference in. And so I hope that you will enjoy this time. We have just a wonderful speaker and a wonderful panel of experts to talk to you guys today about how you can be better for either your child or your teams in the mental health realm. So with that, thank you for being here, and I'm going to invite up Dr. Thompson, our CEO at Covenant Children's.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much for being here today. It's cooler in here than outside, so that's good. My name is Amy Thompson, and I'm actually the CEO at Covenant Children's Hospital. So this event is a super important event for me just because it talks about two things that the Thompson family, we have lived for many years. So we're a family of athletes, so I was raised by a sports-crazed father, so I played everything. I was the only child, so all of his efforts, were on me, and anything that I could play growing up, married an athlete. I've raised 3 Thompson boys who have all been into athletics. We raised my husband's brother. I'll come back and talk about that in a minute, who went to Coronado High School here. And then I have 2 boys of my own. So athletics and everything that has to do with that is a love of ours. And so I'm so excited to specifically talk about this in student athletes. But I will also tell you that as a physician, what I do as a physician is I'm a pediatric hospitalist. So what that means is I just take care of sick kids in the hospital. And so my career has actually been spent seeing firsthand. We take a lot of the very severe, so like if you're in crisis or you're suicidal or you have tried overdoses and things like that ends up on my service. And so I've been firsthand to see and understand what it is that we're dealing with in terms of mental health, and you'll see us today talk about that emphasis. And it is true that this exists in all areas, not just in student athletes, but I will tell you that there's a statistic. So one of the reasons that this was interesting for me is, did you know that of all young people, student athletes are the least likely to talk about mental health issues and to actually go and get help? And so that's an important thing for us to talk about, is because I think that this is a group that feels a lot of pressure. They like to please. They like to be excellent at things. It is hard sometimes for athletes to talk about things that they're struggling with. And so it's really important to us that we emphasize these things. So I talked a little bit about, we raised my husband's brother. For the Thompson family, mental health things have come, right to our house. And so we actually raised my husband's brother because of a suicide in the family. That's how I became a parent. I was 23 years old when Dusty's brother came to live with us. And so we have lived a lifetime just with him and in our own house. And the thing that I say is, I'm many things. I'm a doctor. I'm a pastor's wife. My husband is the pastor here at Redeemer Church. I am a Christian. And the truth is, I struggle as well with depression. And so it's been something that I have struggled with. And I will tell you some of those roles, I don't know that every pastor's wife is the one you want to get up and say, hey, I struggle with mental health issues. But it's true. So it's been a part of my life. We've raised a child that was the direct effects of these things. And so the thing that I hope for you today, and then really this is my prayer for you today, is I know that someone is here who, if you are struggling with anything, and if you're depressed and anxious, or if you just don't know what's going on, whether you're the student athlete, the coach, or the parent that's here today, please just know that there are resources and we want to provide encouragement for you. And then also know that our goal today is just to continue to look at how it is that we can serve our kids. So how can we serve our kids, and how can we make this a part of the conversation, and how can we make sports a great opportunity for kids, but how can we also talk about this other thing that I think sometimes in the church and in other places that we're afraid to talk about. So that is my blessing for you today, and I hope and pray that God will speak to us today in what we're here to do. So thank you, guys.
I play sports because I love the game. I love the friendships that you get to build and bond with people. You get to meet new people. And I think it also builds character for later on in life. It builds character for having a job, being at practice on time. You get to learn, and my coach is basically like my boss. So it's for life skills. That's why I play sports.
I do gymnastics because it teaches me great work ethic, and I create long-lasting friendships.
I play sports because I am extremely competitive. I want to win, and also I like fitness and all that, so it just kind of brings it all together.
I do gymnastics because I'm a very competitive person, and I fell in love with gymnastics when I was a little girl. And I think it's something that helps me work hard and become a better person. Probably when I landed on my face in front of everyone at a competition.
Probably getting a technical during a game. That's probably embarrassing. It was a close game. We had to foul, and the coach is yelling like, foul, foul. And I just run and tackle the girl. And so that was probably my worst sports moment.
But one time during the game, my mom was yelling at me a lot. I turned and said, shh. And it was not pretty when we got home.
My parents nicknamed me A-Train, and it's embarrassing when they yell A-Train across the gym when I'm competing.
When I was younger, my mom used to say, be a tree, because I used to foul a lot, and she said, just keep your hands up like a tree, and she would scream that every time I played defense.
Probably the funniest or embarrassing thing my parents have yelled at is just like my full name, like Heather Paige McNabb, or just like, what are you doing?
They were never, they were always realistic with me. You know, if I did bad and, you know, I would get out and left the meet because I was mad because the judge didn't score me well, my mom would just tell me like, hey, I don't think it was that good. I think they scored you fair enough. And my dad always said, you could always do better.
They're proud of me no matter what, but I'm obviously here to do a job, but that I'm able to talk to them and that they were always able to give me a good hug after the game or just tell me that it would be okay regardless is definitely the best thing that they could have done for me.
My parents say to me, just play your hardest, leave it out there. Like, if you don't do your best, it's fine, just play hard.
I think my parents did a good job separating basketball and life. I never really felt like my performance determined how much love I got from them. They just wanted to see me happy, they wanted to see me having fun, and even now, I'm 24 years old and they still just want what's best for me and want to see me happy.
I think they just reassure me, like, that's what makes me feel better. Like, instead of telling me, like, all that I did, they only point out the good things. Like, they focus on, like, even if they're the little things, they always focus on the better things than the bad.
Before I'm about to play, my mom says, do your best and don't get in your head. And as long as you do your best, I'm proud of you.
I would tell my parents that they don't have to be so serious all the time. It's just fun. Just go out there.
I would tell my parents thank you for giving me a safe place to play my best, to be my best, and to grow. And thank you for loving me even though I don't play my best all the time. And, yeah.
I could tell my parents, thank you. Thank you for signing me up for soccer whenever I was really little. Thank you for signing me up for everything, just getting me involved, and thank you for always having my back, always supporting me, and they're the best, and I love them.
What I see that works the best with the kiddos is when the mom and dad try to get down at their level and relate to them. Like, you know, what do you feel like is the scary part about this skill that's bothering you, or when they go to a meet, you know, they get nervous. They train all year long to only compete about 7 to 8 times a year, you know, and so they get nervous. They can't help it. That's human nature. And so I think when I see the parent relate to them, like, hey, try this, you know, just breathe, instead of just go out there and do it, you know, pretend nobody's there. It's so much harder than it looks. And so I think that there's a good balance, you know, be hard on them, you know, be tough, but also love on them and tell them they did a great job at the end of the day, whether they did really bad and not their best, or whether they did the best meet of their life.
Number one, be an outlet. Don't be a parent that their child feels like if they mess up, they're never gonna be forgiven, that they're not good enough in your eyes, that it's not okay to mess up, because we're all human, eventually it happens. Be a parent where they feel comfortable enough with you being able to tell them, yeah, that was disappointing, but we're gonna get it the next time. And my second thing would be not to force any of it on your child. Like, it's one thing when you're encouraging a child to achieve their dreams, but for you to want it more than them is exhausting. There's a lot of pressure that comes with knowing that your parents want something and then not knowing if you can achieve it on your own. So more than anything, be there for your kids, be an outlet, be somebody that they can talk to, but be their biggest encourager, their biggest cheerleader, and one that they feel like no matter what they do, you're never going to be let down.
I think one thing that parents can do for their children is just to be there for them and be supportive without being too overbearing. I think it's great to encourage children and let them know that you're there for them. But when you start to see that they are unhappy and not wanting to continue whatever they're doing, let them know that it's okay. It's okay not to want to do something, that you're still going to be proud of them no matter what.
All right, I get to introduce our keynote speaker now, John O'Sullivan. John started Changing the Game project in 2012 after 2 decades as a soccer player and coach on the youth, high school, college, and professional level. He's the author of 2 #1 best-selling books, Changing the Game, The Parent's Guide to Raising Happy, High-Performing Athletes and Giving Youth Sports Back to Our Kids, and Every Moment Matters, How the World's Best Coaches Inspire Their Athletes and Build Championship Teams. John's work has been featured by CNN, Outside Magazine, ESPN, NBC Sports, and numerous other media entities. John is an internationally known speaker for coaches, parents, and youth sports organizations and has spoken for TEDx, the U.S. Olympic Committee, U.S. Soccer, USA Wrestling and Swimming, Ireland Rugby, Australian Rugby League, and at numerous other events throughout US, Canada, Asia, Australia, and Europe. When he speaks, John brings to the table a wealth of practical, hands-on knowledge garnered through years of working with players and their families on sports-specific development, parenting, coaching, and creating a player-centered environment. John is also the host of the Way of Champions podcast, one of the most popular podcasts in the world for sports coaching, with millions of downloads and guests such as NBA head coaches Steve Kerr, Quinn Snyder, Brad Stevens, and World Cup winners Anson Durant and Tony DeCicco, and dozens of NCAA, Olympic, and world champion athletes and coaches. He co-hosts an annual conference with Dr. Jerry Lynch that brings together coaches from 6 continents to discuss leadership, team culture, mindfulness, and the inner game. Originally from New York, John played collegiate soccer at Fordham University, where he was a team captain as a senior and a member of the 1990 Patriot League championship team. After a stint playing professionally for the Wilmington Hammerheads of the USISL, John began his coaching career as a varsity boys soccer coach at Cardinal Gibbons High School in North Carolina. He then moved on to become the assistant men's and women's soccer coach at the University of Vermont before delving into the world of youth club soccer, where he still coaches today. He holds his USFSFA license, United Soccer Coaches Advanced National Diploma, and U.S. Youth Soccer National Youth Coaching License. He lives in Bend, Oregon with his wife, Dr. Lauren O'Sullivan, a former athlete at Penn State, and his 2 children and aspiring young athletes, Maggie and TJ. Help me in welcoming John O'Sullivan.
Thank you all. I'm always afraid after that introduction that I'm going to fall on the stairs and everything. Thank you for being here, and thank you, Amy and your husband, for this beautiful facility. And I think about when we want to talk about athlete mental health, which is such a huge and such an important thing, that sometimes we feel like, wow, this room should be full. But then I also think about things like, I'm sure the first time when your husband started this church, maybe it was in your living room or a small building, and then it grew to this one, and now we're building another one. And I think this is a movement. This is a movement in sports to really get down to the nitty-gritty of what this is all about. So what I hope today is that we can come together. We can talk about this, and then you can take what you learn here and you go back out to the teams you coach or the teams that your kids are on, and you just share a little bit of this message, and that's how you get the ball rolling, and that's how you start a movement, because what we're talking about and what Covenant is building, I think this is so, so critical. I've almost coached for 30 years now. Again, at every level. I was a WPSL head coach, a Division I assistant coach, and the NCAA youth from 5 years old to 18 years old. And I would say in the last 2 years, I have come across more kids that I personally know who have either been hospitalized or under treatment for depression, potential suicide, eating disorders, cutting, than the previous 28 combined. So this is a really, really, really tough time for our children right now. And this facility that is being built, it could not come around at a more important time. So thank you for being here, and thank you for being part of this movement to do this. Because we covered it, I won't talk about this, but this is kind of what Changing the Game Project does. This has been a passion project of mine for about 10 years. And I do get to speak all over the world, and I do get to talk to some of the most incredible coaches in the world and athletes in the world. But this started back about 10 years ago when I was coaching the Mighty Unicorns, right? This is my daughter's, 6-year-old soccer team. And who's been to a 6-year-old soccer game? Just show of hands, right? They're great, right? We always giggle because they're fun, right? And you can score in either goal and everyone's equally excited, right? And usually there's no referee or anything, and everyone's happy and positive for the kids. So I was there this one day, and I'm watching the Unicorns, and right next door there's a 10 or 11-year-old boy's, quote, competitive soccer game. And I'm watching the competitive game and going, this is crazy. Because the kids weren't competing any harder, but all the adults were, right? The coaches are screaming at the kids, and the parents are screaming at the kids, and everyone's screaming at the referee who's like 12, right? And I'm thinking, this is crazy. Is anyone on my field thinking, wow, in 4 years, that's what we want? We want to spend more time and more money so our kids can have less fun. And that's kind of how Changing the Game Project was born. Maybe they can be a little bit better for their kids. And when I watch those videos of all those kids being interviewed, I think everything they're saying, we know this, we understand this. There was nothing groundbreaking there that we have ever thought about, we've heard this. Whenever I go and I speak to schools, I always ask the kids, what would you like your parents to say at your game and your match? And what do you think they say? Nothing. Yeah, nothing. Nothing. I've never heard kids say, oh yeah, this is, right? I've definitely never heard any kid ever say, it's super helpful when my dad yells at the ref, right? So they just say nothing, be there, support me, let me know that you see me. But you don't have to say anything. And so this is what we want to talk about today, because I think sport and a great sport experience, if we can do that, becomes such a huge part of our children's development, both physically, socially, emotionally, and mentally, okay? So, how many of you played sports growing up? I know there's a lot of athletes in this room. If you're still growing up, you can raise your hand, right? Okay. Why'd you play? Kids in the room, why do you play? National image rights? No, why do you play? It's fun, I hope. Right? It's fun. You enjoy it. Right? So we have to first understand, if we want to get the mental piece right, what does fun mean to our children? And then we need to make it a fun experience. Now, I think a lot of times as adults, we think fun is things, it's all slappy clappy and whatever. But no. Fun is some different things. There's some really interesting research around fun. This woman, Amanda Visick from George Washington University, she asked kids, write down, why do you play? And they came up with 81 characteristics. And these were the top ones of what makes sports fun. Trying your best, being treated with respect, getting playing time. That's a novel one for a lot of coaches. Playing well as a team, getting along with your teammates, exercising, and being active. Right? So that's what fun is. That's what drives participation, is that enjoyment. Further down the list, number 48 was winning. Now, I've never coached a game in my life where I thought there was 47 things more important than winning. But apparently sometimes kids do. Now, kids like to win. They enjoy winning. They enjoy competing. But I just remember my kids growing up, and they'd go out during recess at school, and they'd set up, a football game or a soccer game or basketball or whatever it was. And they didn't want to stack a team. It wasn't fun to win 8-0. They wanted it to be close. And so they wanted to win 2-1 today and lose 2-1 tomorrow. They wanted that competition. So everything I talk about here, nothing has to do with not winning. We want our kids to win, but what we want more is we want them to learn to compete, to go through the ups and downs. And I think you'll probably hear that from our panel later about how important this is, right? How important this is. I want to also talk about why kids walk away. And usually it's just because it's not fun. So what are some of the things that make sports not fun? And I think here's a huge one. And that is sometimes parents with the best of intention. I know that there's not a single parent in this room who's like, I'm here because I'm hoping to screw up my kid. Right? So we love our kids, and we just don't always love them in the most helpful way. And sometimes on the sideline of our games, that has to do with giving instructions, yelling out, as the one girl talked about in the video where she had to turn and tell her mom, shh, right? As her most embarrassing moment in sport. Her mom wasn't yelling at her because she wanted to hurt her performance. She was just trying to help. But it's actually not super helpful. So I want to do a little test here with you all, and this is called the Stroop test. And this is a 2-part test, and this is one of the most psychologically repeated tests invented by a guy named John Ridley Stroop. What he said is that when you add cognitive interference, it actually makes physical performance worse. It slows down physical reaction time. So we're going to do this test, 2 parts, as a room, out loud, and so all you have to do as a room, and I'm going to time it, is read out all 4 lines, green, yellow, purple, red, blue, yellow, all 4 lines to the bottom. If you're competitive here in Lubbock, the record's 8.5 seconds. Okay? So that is what we're going to do, part 1 of the test. All right, you good? Everyone's ready for that? Does anyone need to stretch or anything? You're good? Okay, ready, set, go. All right, that was like 10. All right, I heard some giggling in the back. Why were you laughing? You got messed up because she was too loud in front of you? Yeah. Right? But overall, that wasn't super hard, right? You just got to read words in front of you. Not bad. We're able to get through it pretty quickly. All right, that's part 1. Part 2, and I think we can kind of see it on the screen. It's a little dark, right? So these are the same words and same font, but now instead of saying the word, you have to say the color. So you have to say blue, red, green, blue, yellow, blue. Okay? Does anyone want to stretch now? All right, so we just did about 10 seconds on the first one. Same thing. Out loud, as fast as we can go, all 4 lines. On your marks, get set, go. That was pretty hard. I love you guys because you made it to the second word and you started laughing. Right? So all of a sudden, we add a little bit of interference, right? We read green, but we have to say blue. We read blue, but we have to say yellow. And everything comes to a screeching halt. I think this is what happens when our kids are trying to play, especially a game like basketball or soccer or ice hockey or whatever, where they're trying to make decisions and perceive and act and perception, action, and we're yelling instructions on top of it, right? It slows them down. And eventually it slows them down so much that someone turn around and go, shh, Be quiet, right? So what happens when we do this, right, is we take away autonomy, we take away ownership of the experience. And when we do that, right, all of a sudden the joy goes out of it a little bit. Now we understand this in other aspects of our kids' life. I talked to you about my daughter Maggie before. This is her at when she was 7 at her first piano recital. Uh-oh. I lost the audio of that. There we go. So that's pretty good, right? 7 years old. Did anyone think someone in the audience was going to yell at her for making a mistake? No, of course not, right? Because it totally wouldn't make sense. How many of you have been to a middle school band concert or orchestra? Yeah, they're a little tough, right? How many of you have ever heard a parent stand up and yell in the middle of it, "The woodwinds are killing us tonight"? Of course not, because it wouldn't make any sense, right? It wouldn't help the kids play better. It would be a little bit embarrassing, but it's not embarrassing in sports to yell at the kids or the ref or whoever, right? And so oftentimes in sports we see this. Who's worried that you're on the next video? They just scored another goal. That's what we forced about this better. I got it. You hear the guys filming at the end, she's like a cheerleader on crack. Do you think she loves her kids? Yeah. She's loving them in a helpful way. Go, go, go. Follow that ball. I think they got that part, right? And so that's kind of interference. And then that grows into more and more confusing things. And if you think about a game like soccer, where in a split second someone has to perceive what's happening, conceive of all the different solutions to that part of the game, pick one, technically execute it, assess their choice, and do it again in soccer and basketball and all these different things, they can't take input. And so that right there can all of a sudden cause undue stress. I'm letting dad down. I'm letting mom down. And it feeds into these issues that when I lose ownership, right, my identity around sport, it becomes I'm the soccer player, or I'm the football player, or I'm the basketball player, and not, hey, it's something that I do, but it's not who I am. And when it becomes who you are, then all of a sudden when you get injured, when you get cut, when you don't make your team, when you don't play, that's when all these psychological and social emotional issues start kicking in. Sport can be this wonderful vehicle for growth, and it can be this vehicle for incredibly damaging things too. Sport is not fundamentally good, nor is it fundamentally bad. I think sport is neutral. Sport in the hands of coaches and leagues and caring adults is incredibly powerful and amazing, and in the wrong hands is incredibly damaging. But so often we sign our kids up for a sport with this assumption, well, sport's got to be great. But oftentimes it's not. And so as a parent, we have to be so intentional. As a coach, we have to be so intentional that it's being done right. Now, another thing that can eventually be very damaging for children is this. And to be fair, he's quite good. Right? Push for early specialization, forcing them into one sport. There's a massive amount of pressure in sports to choose younger, earlier. Some kids love it. Some kids find their passion right away. Some kids take a long time to find their passion. Right? But we've created a youth sports system, especially in North America, where if you're not in at 5, 6, 7, you're out, and it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. You can't get back in. And that's not based on science. That's not based on physical growth. That's not based on what's best for social, emotional growth. That's based on what the business of sport thinks is best. And so as a parent fighting for your children's autonomy to pursue what they want, to sample different things, and then find something that's a good fit, absolutely critical. Absolutely critical. Now, even if your son or your daughter has one sport that they love, they still need a multi-movement experience. I don't care how much they love soccer. I don't care how much they love football. And football's not so bad because people usually don't play football all year round. They're doing strength and conditioning. They're doing yoga. They're doing movement. But you need a multi-movement experience. I've gotten to travel all over. When I went to Manchester United and I walk in there, their fitness center for kids, it's like a gymnastics gym. And they're doing parkour. And they're lifting weights, and they're doing yoga, and they're moving so that they can become athletes first, and then soccer players second. So critical. Okay? The other thing we have to do as parents is be patient, right? Be patient. All these kids are 12, right? All these children are 12 years old. And what we do in sport is we group kids by calendar age and not developmental age. Right? A 12-year-old boy could have a 5-year developmental age swing, which means he could have the body of a 15-year-old or the body of a 10-year-old. Now, you'd never play your 10-year-olds against your 15-year-olds, but you go to a 12-year-old soccer game or basketball game, and that's what it looks like. Right? Baseball. Who's ever watched the Little League World Series? Right? And you have this kid on TV, and it's great, and he's 12, and he's striking everyone out, and they're like, wow, what an athlete. And I'm like, he has a mustache. Right? Here's a kid for you. You see that kid at the end? He could have caught him. He's like, hell no, I'm not going to catch this kid. Right? I'm going to run just close enough to him so my dad doesn't yell at me, but I'm not going to try to tackle him. Right? Now, is that kid 10? Yeah, maybe. Not developmentally, though, and I'm not saying he's not a good rugby player. I'm just saying that sometimes we put so much into early childhood performance, and we look at early performance as an indicator of later performance, and it's a terrible indicator. It's one of the worst. How you do when you're really young is an absolutely awful indicator for how you'll do later on, right? And yet we put so much pressure on kids when they show that early glint, And then all of a sudden they can't keep up with it because, you know what, maybe, usually the worst thing we do to our kids is give them bad genes, right? And not the type that you wear, but the type that determine how fast you run and how tall you are and how strong you are, right? But that early performance, right? If we put the author David Epstein calls it the cult of the head start. If we put a 20-year-old's hours into a 10-year-old athlete, yeah, they're going to do pretty well. But eventually everyone grows and everyone catches up. And so taking this patient and balanced approach and watching the whole journey is huge. So in my book, Changing the Game, I talk about these 7 C's of a high-performing state of mind. But these are also these things that we need to give our children if they are going to, just be a healthy human being, right? They need common sense and perspective from us. They need good communication. They need caring and unconditional love. They need control and ownership. They need to develop competence, and that's where confidence comes from. And so when we do this, right, what happens is we help them develop certain things, right? Number 1, helps our kids take positive action. Now, I get organizations that come to me or coaches and they say, oh yeah, make my kids mentally tough, right? Give my son, give my daughter confidence. Let me tell you this. It's not about confidence. It's about taking positive action. One of the worst things that we see on TV, right? Did anyone watch golf this morning, British Open? Right? Not a big golf town, I guess. Okay. So British Open final, right? This guy, Cameron Smith, wins it, Australian guy. And I know the sports psychologist who works with him. And he was just unbelievable today, and he wins the tournament. And people say, wow, you looked really confident out there. It's like, no, you looked really competent out there. Right? So confidence comes from competence. If my child is struggling with their confidence, that's an indicator to invest in competence, in taking positive action, in getting better. You can't give someone confidence. They have to earn confidence. Number 2, building capacity to endure stress and anxiety and fear is something that sports can do. When you turn on the TV and you watch a guy trying to win the British Open today, you watch Steph Curry making free throws, you watch the best athletes in the world doing what they do, they all feel stress. They all feel anxiety. They all feel fear. Those are the terms and conditions that we agree to when we sign up to play. Right? If you don't want to feel those things, sport is probably not a great place for you. But as a parent and as a coach, if I can help my kids learn that, hey, it's perfectly normal to feel these things, let's give you the tools, right, to just endure them, right, and work through them and build the competence to deal with them, then you're fine, right? And that's what sport is wonderful for, because those things translate to life, right? They go way beyond the sports field. They go into everything else that you do. And this is what I love about sport, and I think about my own sporting journey and career, is that everything I got, and I had a lot of injuries, and I had to stop playing at 26 because of 2 broken legs. And you know what? Like, I still think about the things that I learned in rehabbing and coming back from those things that have helped me push through a lot of other things in life. So I look back at my sporting experience with great fondness. I look back at some of the coaches who were there for me with great fondness. I look back at some of them. I grew up in New York, and some of them were not so good, right? And took away my self-belief, cut me down as a human being, right? I don't want to be that person for kids. But sport can be this vehicle where we learn to do this, where we look at it and say, I'm supposed to feel this, and let me just build the capacity in training and practice and games to deal with this. And then finally, just getting in touch with our why, right? You want to keep kids in sport, you want it to be a healthy experience. They have to know why do I play? What drives me? My own children, they do it for love. My daughter, who I showed you there, right, she's 16 now. She still plays. She doesn't want to play in college. She could, but she doesn't want to. But when I say, well, why do you play? She's like, I love my team. I love the girls I play with. Some of her teammates are going and signing scholarship offers and everything. She's like, I want to support them to do what they want to do so I can go do what I want to do, right? And follow my own passions in life, which is amazing, right? I have a son who, he's not sure what he wants to do, but you know what? It's fine. I love the fact that my kids are, good students and good human beings and can have a conversation and have dealt with difficulty because of sport and have gotten a lot of good stuff out of sport, but that they know why they play. When I was a college athlete and coming back from an injury, right, if I didn't want to be there, there's no way I would have done it, but I loved to play. I remember when our season would end as a college soccer player, the next day we'd be playing in some league in New York City, right? Or playing futsal all winter long in the indoor courts. I just love to play. And I see so many children right now who have lost that love. It's a job. There's no joy. And so it's so important for us to keep coming back to, well, why do you do this? Is this supporting you? Is this making you a better person? Because it doesn't matter how many games you win if your child has been beaten down and diminished by a coach, been demeaned, okay? So, 2 things that I want to give you on this, right? Number 1, creating the right conditions. And for kids, one of the things they always talk about is the ride home after games. The ride home. We're physically and emotionally exhausted, right? Our kids are, oftentimes we are as mom and dad. And yet we're going to make this a teachable moment. And kids often tell us this is the least teachable moment, right? I see kids in the audience now pointing at their parents or elbowing them, right? This is a video from HBO did a documentary a couple years ago called Trophy Kids. I don't know, has anyone seen Trophy Kids? Right, this is actual footage, it's not a movie, right? Documentary footage of the ride home. Volume.
Stand right next to him.
Are you sure? Because I stood right next to you.
I was by him as many times as I could be.
Dude, you're not getting it done. Let me explain something to you. If you do something wrong, do I tell you?
Yeah.
Okay, I correct it. Or I tell you so you can correct it. How do you know what to correct if you don't even know why he pulled you out of the game? What did I tell you about that? Are you scared of him or something?
No.
So why don't you go ask him? Like right now, you know we're going to have this conversation after the game. You know it's coming. Okay, this is part of you becoming a young man. If someone does something, you're just going to take it? So if I was to walk up to you and just slap you inside your face, what are you going to do? Just turn around and be like, I don't know why that guy did that. It doesn't make any sense, Jay. You act like you're 10 or 9 or 8. Dude, you're just going through the motions. If you're going to be selfish, you know what? You have other brothers and sisters. Okay? We'll take you from out of that school and give them a chance and put them in a private school. I don't understand it. I don't understand it. It confuses me. What's the problem?
Every time I come back, like in the car, I always feel like I'm in trouble or I did something wrong.
Well, did you?
Yeah.
You've had more personal training than any of those kids out there. Okay? Back to the drawing board. Back up to getting early, back up inside the morning. Okay? Because it doesn't make any sense. You have me driving back and forth from this school. Back and forth, back and forth. Back and forth for you to go out and do absolutely nothing. I don't understand why you don't get it. I don't understand it.
So anyone seen Trophy Kids? Anyone know? I can't see hands, no. Yeah. You remember how it ends? This kid quits football. His parents are divorced. He's living with his dad, moves out, goes to live with his mom. And so here's the thing, right? There's a dad who clearly loves and cares about his son, and yet he's made the ride home after every practice and every game feel like I did something wrong, feel like a prison. And what kids, when they've interviewed kids after sport and say, what's your worst memory of youth sport? This is it, the ride home after games. Because they're trapped. And this is really hard as a parent because we love them and we just want to help. Remember, my son was 5. He was playing like his first youth soccer game, and I was his coach, and we supposed to be this all-star coach, and he rolls up to the first game, and he goes, nah, I don't want to play. And he walks off. And I'm like, okay, fair enough, whatever. I'll coach the other kids, and goes to practice that week. Everything's great. Next week, rolls up again. There's a game before us, a bunch of tall adults yelling and screaming at kids. He goes, no, I don't want to play again. So now I'm upset, and I'm angry. Right? I'm like embarrassed that I'm supposed to be the all-star coach and my kid won't play. He's perfectly happy because he found like a lizard or something off on the side, right? So he's doing great. So we get in the car after the game. He's in the back and he's putting his seatbelt on. I'm putting my seatbelt on. I'm like, so TJ. And all of a sudden, wham, I get the karate chop across the chest from my wife. I was like, what was that for? She goes, really? Didn't you write a book about this? Right? So it's hard. It's hard. We just want to help. But this moment here can't be a prison for our children. As soon as my daughter gets in the car, she goes, Dad, how do you think I did today? And we have a conversation, right? And I always kind of do 3 things. What went well? And I ask her this. What went well today, right? What needs work? What didn't go well? What can you work on in practice this week so that next week's better? That's it. Whether she has her best game or her worst game, right? How do you think I did today has never once occurred to my son in the car. You know what occurs to him? What's to eat? What's for lunch? What's for dinner? But him and I have this really good thing that usually like that night before he goes to bed or sometimes the next morning, that's when we'll talk about it. And I'll give him feedback and I'll ask him those same questions. Okay? So don't let the car ride home become this prison. Don't let it become something that breaks your relationship with your kids, because this is rarely ever a teachable moment. There are far better moments to teach and give input, especially if you know what you're talking about. And then number 2 is just this caring and unconditional love. And when I did my TED Talk, this was sort of the whole idea. What can you say to your kids after a game? I love watching you play. I love watching you compete because it frees them from the burden of being responsible for your happiness. And it's amazing when you do this, you watch them just go, oh, relax. And I've had parents who have come to my talk and or read my book and call me years later and say, you know what, I thought that was dumb. That seemed too simple, and it saved my relationship with my child. Or I called up my kid who's in college, and I told him for the first time, you know what, I never told you this. I love watching you play. And so then about 2 years ago, it was this video came out of Kobe Bryant, and I thought it was pretty powerful. If you can turn up the volume here.
And y'all come playing, and I don't score 1 point the entire summer. Really? Not one. How old were you? 11, 10, 11.
You were playing against other 10, 11-year-olds? Or you didn't score once?
Not one.
Were you in the game?
I was in the game.
How did you not score?
Because I was terrible.
Really?
Yeah. I remember crying about it, being upset about it. My father just gave me a hug and said, listen, whether you score 0 or score 60, I'm going to love you no matter what.
Wow.
Now, that is the most important thing that you can say to a child. Because from there, I was like, okay, it gives me all the confidence in the world to fail. I have the security there. But to hell with that, I'm scoring 60. Let's go. Right. From there, I just went to work. I stayed with it. I kept practicing.
It's one of the most powerful 1-minute videos I've ever seen. I'm going to love you no matter what. And if we know anything about Kobe, then no one worked harder, but he owned it. He was intrinsically motivated. If you said, I'll meet you at the gym at 5, he showed up at 4, right? Because no one was going to outwork him, because he wasn't afraid to fail. And as a child, and we think about this, if Kobe Bryant at 10 or 11 years old cannot score a single point all summer, it's probably okay if our kids don't score, right? don't score a goal, or they mess up, or they make mistakes. We have to love them no matter what. We have to love them no matter what. And if we do that, if you just take that from here, that frees children from this burden, right? It frees them from the pressure that is already on them in sport and in life right now to be perfect. It lets them know that you're there for them no matter what. And they need us to be there. They need parents. They don't need more friends right now. They need parents to help navigate them through these times that are difficult, where pop culture isn't sending a lot of good messages, right? And it's very easy for people to just cause major, major distress for children through social media and all these things. And it's hard to be a parent. My God, my wife and I mean, we every night we're talking about how do we navigate this? How do we navigate that? Because it's so different. I'm 50, right? It's so different from when I was growing up, right? When it was like leave the house at when the sun comes up and hopefully show up for dinner, right? That was what and playing all sports and doing all sorts of things. And now I have to worry about every time my kids pick up a phone, or what's going to be on that video, or what sort of stuff is happening behind the scenes. So they need us more than ever to just love them no matter what. And to use sport as this vehicle to make better people. I love this quote here. I'm sorry, these balloons are in the way, right? Sport is like a double-edged sword. Swung in the right direction, the sword can have tremendously positive effects, but swung in the wrong direction, it can be devastating. The sword is held by adults who supervise children's sports. Whether sport is constructive or destructive in the psychological development of young children greatly depends on the values, education, and skills of those adults. I started my book, Changing the Game, with that quote, because I don't think it can be said any better than that. And if you're in this room today, I know you're trying to be a force for good. And I know that what Covenant Health is doing is to be a force for good in this community to do that. Because again, right, sports are neither good nor bad. They're not fundamentally good. They have to be run and supervised and overseen by the right people. This is my daughter's soccer team last weekend at an event. They're in California right now, right? This is an amazing group of those little unicorns from 10 years ago. Still playing, still loving sports, still close together. They go to 4 different high schools, these kids, and yet at least every 3 weeks during their high school season, they all get together and do stuff as a team because they've built camaraderie and love and support. They've become a welcoming community. They've become a support community. And then even within this group, there's been kids who are struggling, kids who are going through stuff. And so sport is just so important in their lives to help navigate. It was the first thing that became normal during COVID. It was the first thing that opened up. Again, I live in Oregon. They didn't go back to school physically for a while, but we could play sports. And we had to create something that just was like, oh man, this is great. I just want to be here. All right? So I'll finish with that and just give you all my contact info and stuff there. That's my email, Twitter, Instagram, all that sort of fun stuff. Also, if you want, you can have a free copy of Changing the Game book there. If you want to download it, you can take a picture of that. Again, the podcast is called Way of Champions. I've gotten to speak to some of the best people. We just ran our conference 2 weeks ago. We had Steve Kerr on. We had Sandy Barber, the AD at Penn State, one of the most powerful women in sport. We just had amazing people talking about how we can take sport from a transactional to a transformational experience. But it all starts with us in this room. It all starts with us trying to make a movement that puts the children first and turns the focus on them and demands a lot and makes it competitive and makes it challenging, but attaches those lessons to the bigger picture of life. And I know we have this great panel coming up right now, and I'm sure you're going to hear about some of the lessons that they've learned through sport. But every one of us, every child is on their own journey, and they're all different, right? But if you can just love them no matter what, if you can give them that freedom to just own it and enjoy it and build that intrinsic motivation to keep doing it, that's how you turn this into a force for good, okay? Thank you all so much.
We know that these kids are kids that are going to school. They're on your baseball teams. They're, sitting in your churches. These are kids and they're having real issues and real problems, and we want to be able to help come alongside that and really help those kids. When I go into other communities and I say, what services can we help provide for you? This is always the number one thing on the list, is we are struggling with what to do with this burden of mental health and behavioral health. I would love to take the stigma away from that. It's the reason I want it in the Children's Hospital. That is a part of healthcare as we know it, and we want to take care of those kids and help them find a way to know that it's okay, that these are struggles that they have, and actually give them some real tools to hold on to.
I feel like it is such a privilege to work with a mission-driven organization like Covenant Health System in general. And talking with Dr. Thompson and her vision for supporting children and families, no matter what medical issue they are navigating. And we know that supporting the mental health and psychiatric health of parents and families actually makes their other treatment more effective. The mind and the body are interwoven much more than any of us sometimes acknowledge, and supporting the mental health, that relational health, how you relate to yourself, how you relate to your community, can only serve to improve the overall picture and the overall outcomes for our children and families. We have no children's or adolescent inpatient unit for our area. We have no children's or adolescent day treatment or intensive outpatient services. So if a child or family is in extreme crisis, they leave our community and they go very far away, hours away. It is important to treat this as it is, one of the most common issues that children and families face. More common than a broken arm, more common than diabetes, more common than a cancer diagnosis, but often much more functionally impairing for the long run, and really, something that must be addressed and we must take seriously. And so the appropriate place to house it is where people know to go to get care, and that's within the Children's Hospital. I could talk about a kiddo that I have discharged from my clinic, and he came to see me probably about 9 months ago. And he came in, he was on many different medications and was given a serious mental illness diagnosis. And at school, he was struggling. His mother came in tears and said, "We've tried everything, we don't know what to do." School basically said, "You're gonna have to find an alternative program for him." He came in to see me, and I knew immediately that he was, number one, on too many medications, and that the medications that he was on weren't the correct medications, that we needed to change them. But we did not have an inpatient service or an intensive outpatient service to do this. When I think about this unit, I think about how much more quickly I could have gotten him and the family the services that they needed if we had a collaborative approach. Everybody worked in the same physical environment, and we had this continuum of services that we could plug him into. Now, at the end of my treatment, Mom looked at me and when I said, "You don't need me anymore." And she started crying. She said, no. And I said, you know you don't need me anymore. And she said, I know we don't. She said, we are 1,000,000 times better than when we came here. And she said, thank you so much. And in my heart, I was very grateful we were able to get there, but I wish we could have done it sooner. I know in an approach, if we have a unit, if we have a program like what we're building at Covenant Children's, we could have helped that family sooner. They wouldn't have ever gotten to that point, possibly, would be my hope. One of the things that hurts my heart every day, and what motivates me to go forward, is that the second leading cause of death for children and adolescents in the United States is suicide, is a death of desperation. That's for 10 years of age and up, 10 to 34. When I think of a 10-year-old feeling so desperate that they don't want to live anymore, and that's almost as common as them dying by a car accident, that is a scary thing. This needs our attention and deserves our attention.
I resonate very much with this vision of what we want to do in this relational health space. My husband and I had the privilege when we were 23, oh my goodness, of adopting his brother. And so his brother came to live with us, and he came to live with us because of a family suicide. And I have spent a lifetime walking with him through this, walking with him through losing his mom to suicide, his bouts with depression. This is happening to people around you, and it's probably the people that you don't think that it's happening to, that these kind of struggles and the reality of behavioral health and mental health issues is a reality.
Children's mental health, adolescent mental health, that family relational unit is an initiative, is the place where we can make the biggest investment in our community. The future is so exciting here. We can do this. We can intervene. What I love about West Texas, and what I say over and over, and especially Lubbock, is that we are big enough to have expertise, to have really smart people doing really great things. We're small enough to get them all together to do it the right way. And that's why I'm here, and that's what I'm most excited about, that Covenant Children's and Covenant Health System in general is taking on this charge to lead the way to fill these gaps for relational health, where treating mental health distress and promoting mental health will no longer be a secret, it'll be a celebration.
So I'll just take just a sec to kind of pull all this together and why we were so privileged just to be a part of this. So first, Lauren, thank you. I want y'all to think about how many people in Lubbock, Texas are involved in the sports world. There's a lot of people, right? This is a pastime in Lubbock, Texas, with all of the sports. And what we're bringing together today is this idea of this love for sports, but also this very real reality that even outside of sports, that our kids right now are under assault from a lot of things. This stuff that we're talking about is more prevalent than you want to recognize. When Dr. Wakefield, who is a fantastic partner for me, talks about that, it's the second leading cause of death in our kids. And we've got to shed some light on it. So Lauren, the reason I'm grateful that you started the conversation is because I want you to think about how many people that we know that next year when we do this event, we need to get in this room where we can talk about how we can start entering into this discussion. This isn't gonna happen like one conference, this is not gonna do it. You know, one time where we say, hey, we wanna bring some attention to this. This is about all of us that are here today, determining that in Lubbock, Texas, where we live, that we want to bring light to the fact that we have childhood mental health issues that abound in our community. And then the second piece of that is that the biggest place that you sometimes see this stuff is actually in child athletics. As a physician, what I can tell you is there's all these studies that are out. So like when you're depressed, what do they tell you to go do to raise your levels of endorphins and all this stuff? Go play sports, right? Like you feel better when you go run. There's some interesting articles that come out that basically talk about sometimes in this youth sports culture that sometimes the effects of that are undone by this thing that we've been talking about today with how much pressure our kids just feel in general. And so I just encourage you today, let us be the beginning of that discussion and think about what it would be John, I'm going to use your term here. What if we in Lubbock decided to change the game? And by the way, just so that you feel like goodness, man, I'm a parent who has broken every rule in this book. I was thinking to myself, I'm so thankful that there hasn't always been a camera. For the love, who agreed to put a camera in their car on the drive home? Like, who agreed to that? I wish I could say I've never yelled at a referee or an umpire. That my husband always jokes that, there's, the bad people like the umpires who can't find a strike zone. Like sometimes this is how we yell at folks. And my point is, I've been a part of that as well. My son is a college baseball player, and he actually had the privilege this last year, he got to play at junior college with a kid who had moved from Lubbock but was on his travel baseball team growing up. Okay, so these kids grew up playing. Jarek moved when he was probably 12, Dusty, or so. And then Roman and Jarek got to play again together at Midland College this last year and a half. So my husband and I, we had taken all the boys to dinner. And y'all, here's the important part of this thing. Y'all, we were good. Like, they were good when they were playing. So we're at dinner one night, and Jarek said, "Hey, Coach Dusty," talking to my husband, he goes, "Hey, Roman and I have a question for you." And we're like, "Okay." And Roman and he and Jarek said, "Were we good?" And Dusty's like, what are you talking about? He's like, when we were the Lubbock Raiders, like when we all played together, like, were we good? And I think Dusty and I were like, yes. We put all this, you can't remember if we were good. And Jarek was like, that's not anything I remember. Man, I just remember all of the great times we had at the hotels and this practice and my teammates. And we have this sweet picture of Roman and Jarek that when Jarek was moving, we have this picture of actually my son crying so hard that Jarek had his arm around him because he was so sad that he was leaving. And I'm just going to leave us with, that was instructive for me as a parent, that we put all this emphasis on this stuff. And man, my college-age kid and his friend had to ask us if they were good in the end. And so I'm just going to leave us with that. And thank you guys so much for being here today. I'm so grateful for the folks who are going to be part of this panel. But that's where we want to start today to see if we can change the game on this in Lubbock, Texas. Thank you, guys.
All right, now I get the pleasure of introducing some really fabulous athletes and coaches, along with a wonderful mental health counselor. So Dane and our panelists, if y'all want to start walking up here. Dane Eggleston is a mental health counselor for us at Covenant. And then we have Ashley Chevalier, who is a current Texas Tech basketball player for our Lady Raiders. Mikey Marshall, who played under Bobby Knight. I thought he was helping you up the stairs. He played under Bobby Knight. He played professionally overseas, and now is the coach and owner of Wreckham U basketball. Tarek Bakali is a current LCU player and just finished up his first season with the Lubbock Matadors. And then Steve Gomez, I'm sure you've heard of, is coach of the LCU Lady Chaps, who's brought them to some national championships. So with that, I'm going to let them have a conversation here and see if we can learn a little bit from these guys.
All right, thank you for that introduction, Lauren. So I have questions specifically designed for each of you, so we'll kind of go down the line, and we'll start with you, Ashley. So you are a recent transfer to Texas Tech, and you're going to be playing under Coach Krista Gerlich for the women's basketball team. You're also a big advocate, you and I talked about this a little bit, you're a big advocate for creating mentally healthy environments for athletes, and you talk about that on social media. Specifically, even sharing that you were choosing to prioritize your mental health when you decided to transfer to Texas Tech. So first of all, welcome to Lubbock. I'm wondering, can you talk to us a little bit about your experience and what brought you to Lubbock?
Yeah, so for me personally, when I committed to my previous university, I was recruited by a different coach that I ended up playing for. So before I got on campus, my coach had gotten fired and there was a new one that came in. And with that, you don't really get to like understand who they are, know what their goals are and everything. So I was kind of blindsided when I came in and I learned the type of person that coach was and everything he prioritized, which was not really anything but winning. That was always his goal. He wanted to be successful. He wanted to add on to his accolades, and that was always what he prioritized and what, made us as athletes felt like was the most important thing. And when I started going on visits after I went into the portal, I had a new perspective and I knew what I was looking for. So probably my first question I asked to every coach is, what do you do for your student athletes for mental health? Because especially at this time, I was in a place where I was deeply affected with my mental health issues. So I needed to know that I would be loved, supported, and that they weren't just going to do the bare minimum. So that's really what attracted me to tech, because they have so many resources, and it's not something that they do just to say they do it, to kind of check off a box, which I feel like most athletic programs do. It was something they truly prioritize, they care about, and you can feel that throughout the whole staff. And that was the most important thing for me. And even now, we do weekly meetings as a team to kind of understand how everybody's feeling and doing those things. And you don't see that a lot in collegiate athletes because that's not something they really care about.
That's great that was something that you saw that was emphasized here that allowed you to come here. I mean, that's fantastic. And obviously, as a mental health counselor myself, I mean, that's really, really great to hear. Next, I want to move to you, Mikey. So you've had a successful career. You played at Texas Tech under Bob Knight, traveling overseas to play professionally, and now you're taking your experience and you're working to impact the lives of young kids through basketball. Can you tell us a little bit about, first, your experience under playing for Bob Knight?
I mean, do you really want to know? Just my experiences from 19 to 21, whatever the case was, it was totally different than how I see it now as an adult. Completely different. Just to kind of piggyback off of what Ashley was saying, like it's a job. Like you hate to look at it from that perspective, but when you walk into the building, it's a job. When you leave the building, it's a job. When you go to study hall, it's a job. And you kind of forget the love. You forget why you even played the game. But from my experience with Coach Knight was, I wish we'd had a lot of those mental health and mental awareness meetings myself, so I wouldn't have to figure it out when I was playing professional overseas. A lot of people do the best that they can. I'm not here to judge Coach Knight, the staff, or anybody else. Everybody's from different walks of life, so we all have to figure it out the best way we can. And try to pass it down, pass it forward as well as we can, the best way we can teach it. Because at the end of the day, everybody learns differently. I I know all I needed was a little bit of love. Coming from a broken home, I needed a little bit of love. I need someone to maybe just to ask me how I was doing, how was my day, instead of having to walk into the building and being fearful of hey, 2 days ago, you had this turnover. Hey, 4 days ago, you missed this blockout. Just being cared for, being loved, because I knew I loved the game, but I wanted the game to love me as well. Especially the people that, my mom trusted me with and playing for, them to provide that safe place, because it was my safe place. Growing up in a broken home, I had a lot of mental issues that I really just didn't deal with until I was maybe 31, 32, and now I'm 40. So for me, I'm just trying to pass those down to my kids, my personal kids, but as well as some of the kids within our Rec MU basketball organization.
I appreciate you sharing a little bit about some of your own mental health issues. I know that it's hard to be vulnerable like that in times, and I imagine for you, it sounds like you've become pretty comfortable with it. But even so, it can be hard to think about some of the things that you struggled with, and then sharing that publicly. So I appreciate your willingness to do that and owning that, and saying, like, because of my background, if I just had some love, maybe things would have been a little bit different for me. But that's what you were seeking out in basketball, right? That you really needed. So thank you for sharing that. Tarek, I want to move to you next. So you just finished up your first season playing for the Lubbock Matadors. And I know you're also about to go into your final season at LCU. Can you tell us a little bit about your journey that brought you to Lubbock?
Well, I had a bit of a different upbringing to a few of you guys in this room. I was actually born in London, England. I spent the first 18 years of my life there. Been playing soccer since I was 5. Do you mind if I call it football? I'm going to stick with football, all right. So I've been playing football since I was 5. Every weekend, almost every day, my whole family's football crazy. And then I had the opportunity when I was 16. I got approached by someone, said, I think you would do great out in America. You can study and play. And then, yeah, they came to me and said, hey, if you'd like to follow up this opportunity, go for it. But at the time, I was actually I wasn't really too interested in the opportunity. I was quite young, and I was honestly quite scared to go all the way across the world to leave my family and leave everyone. But it took some of my coaches that were close to me and said, listen, you're going to regret this if you don't follow your dreams and go do something that puts you out of your comfort zone. You're going to regret it for the rest of life. And at the end of the day, if you don't like it, come back. So I made the decision and spoke with our old head coach at the time, Paul Gilbert. He's just left, but he's a great man. And then I came to here in Lubbock, and I've been here for 4 years. And he actually turned out to be the coach of the Matadors, which was quite nice because it meant I got to play Summer League as well. So, yeah, that's how I ended up here.
That's great, and I appreciate you sharing your story. I know that obviously growing up over in London is quite a bit different than Lubbock, but I'm excited to hear a little bit more about your story here in a moment. Coach Gomez, I want to ask you next. So you came to LCU in, I believe, 2003, and you took over the women's basketball program at LCU. Since then, you've led them to 3 national championships, which is just incredible. And I want to preface this question by saying that I'm a Cowboys fan, so I'm really wondering what your secret to success is, because obviously they can't do it. So for you, what is your secret to success? How is it that you've done that, not just once, but 3 times? I mean, it is pretty incredible.
I'm old enough to remember when the Cowboys were good, so that was a while back. You know, the problem with success is it's what is it? I mean, it's so fleeting. It's comparative, which so often, you know, I can tell you a story real quick in a minute about how sometimes that doesn't make sense. I think Mark Batterson in his book wrote, success is doing the best you can with what you have where you are. And so what that means is, you know, I might do my best at something, but it may not be as good as your best at something. And so the problem with success is, first thing I think, we're so worried about my success. We need to be worried about other success. We're so looking for our own all the time, which I think is counterintuitive to really true success. But for example, that year, you mentioned in 2016 we won a national championship. We went 35-0 in our Division II season. But we played UConn in an exhibition game, and they beat us 95-39. So were we really successful? I mean, were we an undefeated team? Well, when you put yourself up against the best of the best, so comparative success it can be damaging. I think what we need to learn to do is just be the best we can be. I feel like in life, in sports, there's no such thing as overachieving. I think it's very rare that anybody ever achieves to what they can. The majority of people underachieve. And so I think what we need to concentrate on is, what can I do to achieve the best I can? So with us, we consider, hey, let's go 1-0 today. You know, we talk about going 35-0. We went 1-0 35 times. We didn't go 35-0. But it's what we try to do is take this possession. Let's do this possession to the best of our ability. You know, against UConn, we were up 2-0. We scored on the first possession. We were ahead of UConn for one possession. And then they just killed us. But it was amazing. It was a lot of fun. But so when we start considering success is too comparative. So I think when we just think, well, what can I do the best I can? So I think to the basis of it, you know, Jesus said, love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. So at the end of the day, if we've done that, we're successful. If we don't do that, tomorrow we need to get after it and do better.
I love that. I mean, I think your answer speaks a lot to why you've been successful, not just in winning national championships, but also, I mean, I've spoken to several of your players that I've known, and they always speak very, very highly of you. And I think that your answer right there was perfect because it's focusing more on how can I be the best that I can be right now in this moment, rather than focusing on winning all the time. It's how can I be my best, and what does that look like for me, right? Which is just wonderful. Ashley, I want to move to you next. So, can you talk to us a little bit about how your parents were when you were a young athlete versus now, and how has their parenting style evolved over the years as far as how they've supported you as an athlete?
So to start this, I think it's important to say that both of my parents are basketball coaches. So I grew up being coached by both of them. And even when I wasn't being coached by them, I was being coached by them. So I think the biggest thing that really helped, I'll say me and my dad, for example, because he is more the hard one. Like, he's going to tell me what I did wrong, what I need to do to fix it, and take that approach. And my mom's kind of the more like, oh, you did a good job, blah, 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 in that sense. Like, she's more positive, my dad's more negative. So when it came to me and my dad, we had a rule that after that ride thing gave me flashbacks a little bit, but we had a rule that in our ride or after a game, we could only talk about the game for an hour. So after that hour, unless I came to him and started that conversation, then that's what that's going to be, because we came to a point where we saw that it was affecting our relationship and that I wasn't really coming to him for other things in my life because I only saw him as a coach sometimes. So I think that was the biggest thing that helped us in our relationship. And when it came to my mom, I think the hardest thing for us was finding that line of when she's my mom and when she's my coach. So, sometimes I would talk to my coach differently than I would talk to my mom, and then like those lines get intertwined and then it becomes difficult. So I think in terms of like, if you are a coach of your child, it's definitely, you have to have strict rules, because when those two bleed into each other, it's hard to separate it again. And then that really can damage, relationships between parent and child.
Thank you for sharing that, and I totally agree that it sounds like there was a boundary that you had to set, especially with your dad, and that was important for you, and that shifted your relationship with him. So I could see how helpful setting that boundary was, and I imagine that video was a little bit difficult to watch, but thank you for sharing that. Mikey, I want to move to you next. So you're now coach to young athletes, coaching 4-year-olds to high schoolers, and I imagine that you've probably engaged with a wide spectrum of parenting styles for some of these athletes. Can you talk to us about some of the different parenting styles that you see, good, bad, and the ugly?
Well, we're all guilty. I mean, let's be honest, even myself. But speaking for the view from the sidelines, I totally get it. I mean, it's 100% spot on. A lot of the parents really want to help, but we're all guilty of hurting our own kids. And I've been guilty of that myself. Wanting to help and crossing those boundaries when we don't necessarily need to. It's a struggle, but you go so far to see on both extremes. from seeing parents just yelling at their kids. And I see how much it hurts them as far as their spirit, from kids coming over to the bench and crying. And I totally get it. You want your kids to give everything that they have, but the gym that we play out here, sometimes it's kind of hot, so maybe that is all that they have, so sometimes us as parents, we tend to forget that it is a loving game if we allow it to be. And sometimes we need to take a back seat instead of always being in the driver's seat, trying to steer the conversation to what we want to help us inside from what we see from the games. So I've seen a lot of kids being hurt, but this is where I can help the parents as well as the kids from my own mistakes, from being a former college athlete as well as being a professional basketball player. I have a high standard for my kids. I really, really do. But at some point in time, the ball stops for everybody. So it's more than just basketball. It's more than just football. It's more the other football. It's life. It's 100% life. You have to teach them character. You have to teach them communication. Like right here, like my daughter asked me, "Hey, Mikey, are you?" Or "Hey, Dad." And she doesn't call me Mikey, but "Hey, Dad, are you nervous?" I'm like, "For what?" Like, just to talk in front of people. If I mess up talking in front of people, that's okay. Like, I played in front of 15,000 over at United Supermarkets Arena. Now, try messing up and over there, and my mom's always in the stands. No matter what, she always showed me love. So just trying to help these parents and help the kids just do the best that they can from what they see and what they feel.
Yeah, I appreciate you sharing that and really emphasizing. I mean, there's only so much that you can control, but you're trying to do your best to care for your players and still set a high standard for them. And finding that balance is something that it sounds like from your experience you've been able to figure out. And that's awesome, because you can still be firm and still care, right? You can still show character and strength and try to give them that, and still show them that you care for them, right? So that's great. Tarek, I want to move to you next. Can you talk to us about the differences you see as far as how football is played back home versus here in the U.S.?
Yeah, so this is quite an interesting question because I've always wondered it, especially before I came out here, about why America hasn't been better in football in terms in their men's team. Obviously, the women's team, world champions, got to give it to them. But the men's team have always underperformed. And you guys have the best sports facilities in the world. You guys give so much time to sports and to training and becoming better athletes and all that. I always wondered why, other than the fact, obviously, a lot of the best athletes go to the more popular sports. Not going to say that's not the reason, but still there's such good athletes in American or soccer. But the national team doesn't quite get to where they should do. And it's something I only realized once I came here, in the fact that LCU, we ref a lot of tournaments that happen. So we see it all the way from 4-year-olds to 15-year-olds. So I'm sorry if I've ever made a bad decision while reffing. Please don't get on to me next time, all right? But it's the fact that even from such a young age, the priority here is always winning. No matter what, it's winning, winning, winning. And like John was saying in the speech earlier, there are kids that are stronger, quicker than the rest just because they're developmentally further. So that kid is by far the best on the team. But because they're the best on the team, they end up doing everything because you guys want to win. So they take all the kicks, they get the ball every time because it's the most effective way. But what I see is a neglect in the other kids in the fact that they don't get the ball and they don't feel a part of the team because the team is based off this one player because that's the most effective way to win. Where once these kids, when we see them, when we have American kids come to college and play with us, and they're freshmen, and they might not be at the same level as, you know, some of the more experienced other college players and some internationals, and they just can't handle the fact that they're not the star player anymore, and a lot end up leaving. And it's such a shame because they don't feel part of the team. And I feel like that is, although they were the star player in their high school, and I feel like that is one difference that I've seen, is that back home, it's a lot more of a team game. There is a lot less of a priority, especially from a really young age, of winning. Of course, we like to win, but it's not just give one player the ball and he does everything. Because I feel like that really creates a neglect in the team sport of what it should be. And like John was saying, just because an athlete's good now when he's younger doesn't mean he'll be good when he's older. And that's something that I've seen and I think could be one of the biggest difference why the men's team underperforms, in my opinion.
Well, that's really interesting because if that team culture is emphasized so much more over there, it makes sense why they would be just naturally better at that, because that team aspect is so important to sports. It really is, and here in the U.S. we don't emphasize that, at least with soccer, I imagine, as much as we should, and really in general, a lot of sports are like that. So that's interesting. I appreciate your take on that. Coach Gomez, I want to go to you next. So you're talking with a room full of parents who want to see their child be successful in the sport that they love. When you want for your child, when you really want the best for them, it's easy to push your kids maybe too much or to go too far.